Hey, good morning, all. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Friday to you. We are going to continue to track Hurricane Lee as it makes an approach towards New England later today and into the Canadian Maritime provinces overnight tonight and tomorrow and through the first part of the weekend. But more storms in the tropics behind it to take a look at. And we are just past the peak of hurricane season, but certainly not finished yet over the next few weeks. So I'm going to talk a lot about what we're looking at here with Lee, and that is going to be a very large storm that continues to move into cooler waters and weakens, but does not shrink in size. So a large area of eastern New England and Atlantic Canada are going to get hit pretty hard here with Lee. Depending on where you live, certainly there's going to be some significant impacts over the next couple of days. Here's a wide view of the tropics and Lee, our major storm at this point. We do also have Tropical Storm Margot, which is slowly weakening and churning over the Northeast Atlantic. But we could have our next name system here. The next name on the list is Nigel, and that would be over the weekend here in the central Atlantic. And that is one we do need to keep an eye on in Bermuda. I do not think it's going to be a threat to the east coast of the US and might not be a threat either to Atlantic Canada. But in Bermuda, we definitely need to keep a close eye on on how this next system evolves here into likely our next depression and then tropical storm. And then to keep us on our toes here, we've got another wave forecast to leave Africa towards the middle part of next week that models are beginning to develop as well. The next name after Nigel would be Ophelia. So that is something we'll be taking a closer look at next week, not really at this point. The GOES data seems to be missing on a lot of our websites, so I'm going to just bring you guys the CIRA RAM satellite imagery. And if that's complicated to you, it is to me, trust me. But main things to look at on the map here is that the Gulf and the Caribbean are about as quiet as you can get, which is great news. But we definitely have a monster here still spinning over the west central Atlantic. Bermuda is right here, and here is the circulation of Lee now moving away from Bermuda. It is beginning to speed up, but it is still growing in size. Right now tracking pretty much just west of north, and expected to make a right turn here and come right into the Bay of Fundy by tomorrow night, impacting a large area across eastern New England and the Maritimes of Canada. We do see Tropical Storm Margot here in the eastern Atlantic. It is beginning to weaken, but still a pretty big size system affecting the Azores. We've got an upper level low here, which is drawing our next disturbance more to the north and west. This is actually, believe it or not, a little bit of the remains of what was Katia a couple of weeks ago, managed to kind of survive at least aloft and not expected to develop. But our next system here is, and that is likely going to track in the general direction of where Lee went, probably just a little bit more to the right of where Lee went. And this one towards the middle and second part of next week, we need to keep a very close eye on in Bermuda. Could be somewhere in this direction here. You can't really see what's coming off the Atlantic. There's another disturbance here that is not expected to develop into any kind of named system, but the one behind it is showing some signs on the models that it may be in a more favorable spot. But that's still a bit of time away for the time being. So I'm not really going to stress too much about it just yet, but something we do need to watch. From tropicaltidbits.com, you can see this imagery is a bit delayed. It's about 2 hours behind. It is coming in, but anyway, just giving you guys another view of what's going on here in the tropics. This is Lee and pulling away from Bermuda right here. The center is about here now and moving in this general direction. Here's Ophelia and not Ophelia, I'm sorry, Margot. And Margot is getting stretched out by wind shear and expected to gradually make a right turn towards the Azores and become non-tropical. Here's the upper low in the central Atlantic that was a part of Katia a few weeks ago, not expected to develop. Here is our next area likely to be our next depression by this weekend, AL97L. It's an area of investigation that models are running on. AL stands for Atlantic, 97 is the numbering system. Runs from 90 to 99. This next one here is probably not going to develop, although it does look a little bit intense, but likely to just kind of weaken here in the trades here in the southern parts of the Atlantic. And then there's another wave in Africa that is expected to emerge next week, and that will track kind of in this direction. And that's one you do want to keep an eye on here in the islands, but it's not going to be impacting you in the next 10 days. So we've got time to watch that one. Here's a look at the official forecast. Hurricane Lee is down to 85 miles per hour, now beginning to accelerate, moving just to the right of north and likely to continue up towards the Gulf of Maine here, approaching the coast of Nova Scotia, the southwest coast here near Yarmouth. Winds will be near hurricane force, but probably falling behind that as we get into colder waters and become extratropical. Then the storm is expected to continue over the Bay of Fundy, making a second landfall east of St. John in New Brunswick sometime in the overnight hours tomorrow night, early in the morning on Sunday, and then track towards Moncton and then over Prince Edward Island or near Prince Edward Island. At that point, not a tropical system, going to resemble more of a nor'easter, but a very big nor'easter. So we are going to see high surf, strong winds, and a lot of rain over the Maritimes here, especially on the western side of the track. So if you're in Maine and even eastern Cape Cod and Nantucket, you are definitely going to feel the impact here later today and tonight. And then conditions will get worse overnight into tomorrow over the areas surrounding the Bay of Fundy, and then eastern New Brunswick, northern Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island getting the impacts here late tomorrow into tomorrow night. That continues into the Gulf of St. Lawrence and approaches Labrador and Newfoundland here on Sunday, but at that point, not really going to be what it is at this point now. You can see from the National Hurricane Center, we do have tropical storm warnings in effect all the way here from the mouth of the Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island through all of eastern Massachusetts, Boston under a tropical storm warning. The islands, Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard, and certainly Cape Cod are under a tropical storm warning. The New Hampshire seacoast is under a tropical storm warning. The entire coast of Maine, which is a very big coast, from the New Hampshire border straight up to the New Brunswick border, under a tropical storm warning. The entire south coast of New Brunswick under a tropical storm warning, and a good chunk of the coast of Nova Scotia from the border with New Brunswick right on down through the southwestern part of that province, right on up to the central coast near Halifax, and all the way up almost to Cape Sable, or Sable Island, Cape Sable, I think it is under a tropical storm warning. Then you'll see here in this area in pink, sort of at the opening of the Bay of Fundy, there is a hurricane watch, as it's still possible that winds could be very close to hurricane strength as this system approaches. It will weaken as it goes into the bay and slows down a little bit and hits colder water, but as it's moving in, it may be a big enough storm for hurricane force winds to briefly impact parts of down east Maine here, basically from Acadia National Park right on to just southwest of St. John here. So right along the US-Canadian border is where those winds could be at their strongest, especially here towards the bay. Also the southwestern coast of Nova Scotia from Digby through Yarmouth, right around the peninsula here to just south of Bridgewater, are under a hurricane watch. Not a hurricane warning, but a hurricane watch, meaning there's at least a possibility at this point. It's not as likely as tropical storm winds. You'll see the peak storm surge forecast is 1 to 3 feet across much of New England. Actually, this has dropped a little bit due to the fact that our storm is speeding up and going a little bit more to the right of where it was expected to yesterday. But still, 3 feet of storm surge is going to impact a lot of folks. I mean, I've been looking at reports of coastal flooding all the way in the Outer Banks this morning from yesterday. So it's a large storm with a lot of wave action. And if you are on the ocean front here, 3 feet of storm surge may go halfway up your body. That's certainly something to be aware of. Even back to Long Island and through the Sound, we could see a couple feet all the way back to Flushing, New York, and Queens and Rockaway Inlet on the south coast of Long Island. This map does not include storm surge in Canada. The Hurricane Center and NOAA do not predict for Canada. I looked on their site, I couldn't find it. I would imagine the surge is actually going to be a little bit higher on the Nova Scotia coastline, maybe as high as 4 to 6 feet, which is, 2.5, 3 meters here on the southwestern coast, especially south of Yarmouth, down and around all the way to near Halifax. So that's where I think the surge is going to end up being the highest, because that wind coming in on the east side is piling all that water up. Bay of Fundy could see some high surge as well, maybe a few feet as well. You can see the area of strong winds continues to grow. While Bermuda has avoided hurricane force winds, you don't have to go too far west into the open waters to have hurricane force winds. This area is quickly advancing northward. We'll see tropical storm conditions moving on to the islands and Cape Cod by around or just after lunchtime, and then moving into Maine and the Maritimes here tonight. Probably not hurricane force winds, but you can see the onset starts this afternoon around 4 or 5 o'clock in Nantucket. And then Martha's Vineyard, Cape Cod, even back into Rhode Island. And then this evening around Boston, and then overnight across the New Hampshire and Maine seacoasts and Nova Scotia. And then by tomorrow morning, we'll see tropical storm force winds battering New Brunswick, the Bay of Fundy, and possibly even into Prince Edward Island here around mid-morning to around lunchtime tomorrow. And then we'll see potential tropical storm force winds over western Newfoundland here by late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. Here you can see that area of tropical storm force wind probabilities, 90% or higher, all the way up into the Bay of Fundy here. 50 to 60% or higher over down East Maine, 30 to 40% on Cape Cod, and even 40 to 50% chance for tropical storm force winds over eastern New Brunswick and central and eastern Nova Scotia. 60% chance that you'll have tropical storm conditions on Prince Edward Island. On PEI, we're likely to see some tropical storm force winds. It's not going to be widespread damage like we saw, maybe farther east last year with Fiona, but it is a big storm. So rather than Fiona, which brought kind of like missile-like winds in, this is not going to have that kind of wind with it, but it is going to have a larger span of how big an area gets impacted here. So not as intense in the middle, but larger. And that's something I just want you all to be aware of. A lot of folks are going to get impacted by this. Waves are very dangerous here. North and west of Bermuda, we are looking at wave heights of 43 feet, which is like what, 20 yards or 18 yards, something like that, or 16 yards. So massive wave action here, and it's only going to grow as we get into the afternoon and tonight. You see this area of pink, that's 45 plus feet of waves. All of that's going to head northward and just batter the offshore waters of Nova Scotia here. Even off of New England, wave heights could get as high as 20 feet. So very dangerous, because I know this is an area where a lot of folks in New England run maritime operations. All the fishermen in the seafood industry are going to get hit by these waves that are as high as 20 feet. Very dangerous out there. Even though the storm surge only going to be a couple feet, the waves out over the open waters are going to be destructive. So while this storm is weakening into a tropical and really an extratropical storm, it is still very big and creating a massive area of water getting drawn around here. And that's going to affect a lot of these ecosystems here in the ocean. So yeah, just a very significant storm. Even though it's weakening quickly when it moves into the area, it's still going to be a nasty one. Fortunately, things do quiet down here by Sunday and Sunday night. Wave action decreases significantly. Then we're going to keep an eye on what I think will be Nigel. This is Bermuda over here, and you can see waves already beginning to ramp up Tuesday night and Wednesday out ahead of it. Perhaps up to 40 feet of wave action here across the offshore waters of Bermuda. Bermuda's right here. This is next Wednesday afternoon. Here we see wave heights that are in excess of 30 feet with the next one. So we don't get a whole lot of a break before things get rough once again. Fortunately for the U.S., the next storm's not going to be as much of an impact as this one here that we're dealing with now, but it is certainly still something that we need to keep an eye on, as things can still change quite a bit in 5 or 6 days. Here's the predicted satellite image here from Lee, and you can see it's starting to lose tropical characteristics, but it's also growing back into New England. Should actually be a really nice sunset here for those of you in the New York City area, Northeast PA, Central and Eastern New York, and Vermont, with all this high cirrus that's getting kicked back here from the size of Lee. But you can look at it and see that while it will technically still have some hurricane force winds near its core, it does not look like a tropical system by the time we get to tonight, and it very well may not be. When Sandy hit New Jersey and Delaware, it was not tropical either. It was just a very big extratropical system. This one's not going to be as big as Sandy, cut the size down by 40%, but still going to be pretty intense here. You can see still very cold cloud tops bringing very heavy rain into Maine here overnight tonight, then spreading into the Maritimes tomorrow. So yeah, tomorrow afternoon, it's going to look pretty sloppy, but it's still going to have those winds and the waves with it, and certainly a lot of significant rain. Then things should move away by the time we get to the end of the weekend. Here's a look at the wind field, and you can see it's actually going to grow a little bit more here, despite the fact that pressures start rising and waters get cooler as the storm gets closer to land. The good news, a couple days ago, a lot of those ensemble solutions that had the system close to Cape Cod are no longer showing that. It's moving a little bit too fast now. But it is going to slowly lose its intense wind by the time it comes in tomorrow into the Maritimes. So really, if you're in Cape Cod, your worst winds are going to be overnight tonight. If you're in Maine, they're going to be late tonight. If you're in New Brunswick, the worst winds will be well in advance of this system. So while the storm may not make landfall till later tomorrow, the worst of the winds is actually going to be overnight tonight. So if you're in this area, please be preparing very quickly for what's going to be a rough period of weather, which could bring you some power outages, even though the storm's going to weaken significantly by the time it finally moves into New Brunswick tomorrow night and over Prince Edward Island by early in the morning on Sunday. But it is losing steam, so that is some good news for you guys here. Projected winds from the HRRR model, you can see how quickly things ramp up. This is going to be around 11 o'clock tonight, and gusts may exceed 50 miles per hour on Cape Cod and the islands here, especially Nantucket. You can see overnight those winds advance towards the Maine seacoast. Wind gusts over 40 miles per hour are projected, 50 miles per hour near Yarmouth here in Nova Scotia. and 60 miles per hour plus on Cape Cod. I don't know why there's not a hurricane watch in effect for Cape Cod, because all of the higher resolution models are showing wind gusts over 70 miles per hour, which is very close to hurricane force on places like Provincetown here and at the very end of the tip of the Cape. And you can see those winds get kind of close here to the north coast here around Marblehead in Massachusetts. They also get pretty close here to Bar Harbor and to the central coast of Maine, where gusts could get very close to 70. So I think, yeah, hurricane watch would not be a bad idea, even though it may be a little bit stronger than what we actually get. But you can see the strongest of the winds are going to be pretty much wrapping up by lunchtime tomorrow as the storm begins winding down. Here's a look a little bit farther to a little bit closer in, so you can see these winds advancing into Maine. Gusts will get up to about 30 to 40 miles per hour before midnight tonight, then up to about 50 to 60 miles per hour tomorrow morning. The stronger winds also sneak up into New Brunswick and to western Nova Scotia here tomorrow morning. And even into central Maine and the mountains, we could see gusts over 50 to 60 miles per hour. But the farther north and west you get, the less likely that wind impacts you. Looking at kilometers per hour for our Canadian friends here, we start to see gusts over 50 kilometers per hour around midnight tonight in Nova Scotia and on the south coast of New Brunswick around 4 or 5 in the morning tomorrow. Then wind gusts can get up to as high as maybe 90 to 110 kilometers per hour on the southern part of Nova Scotia. Even Halifax could have gusts over 80 kilometers per hour. PEI, eastern and southern New Brunswick, 60 to 80 kilometers per hour tomorrow morning. And then we'll see those winds beginning to relax by tomorrow night as the storm begins to move north and weakens more significantly at that point. Rain's going to be pretty significant for the coastal areas here. Parts of Cape Cod could see about 1.5 inches. The eastern half of Maine could see 2 to 3 inches of rain. Higher amounts are going to stay just off the coast here. Looking at Atlantic Canada, we see rainfall amounts beginning to get pretty nasty here tomorrow morning on southwestern Nova Scotia, and then really picking up over eastern Maine and across much of New Brunswick and western parts of PEI. And we may see amounts as high as 70 to even 80 millimeters of rain here. Most of that falling late tomorrow night and through the day on Saturday. It should start to let up by Saturday night. Here's a look into the central Atlantic. These images are delayed, but you can see we're probably going to have a depression forming here out of our next area of investigation. Behind that, this next wave looks like it's going to fall apart. And then you can see the next really big one here getting ready to move off of Africa early next week. That one models are developing as wind shear will be pretty low in advance of it. We also have now Tropical Storm Margot down to 70 miles per hour. And you can see a pretty good circulation, but it is starting to hit some wind shear and some cooler waters in here. So it looks pretty, but it's not going to be really a threat to anybody. It's going to loop back around, making a clockwise loop here, weakening by the time we get into next week. Here's our area of investigation. This is the visible satellite image. Now the sun's been up here in the eastern Atlantic, and you can see it's got some pretty decent banding features, pretty low wind shear, but still lacks an organized core at this point. Once it does develop a lower level center somewhere in here, it will start strengthening, and I think it'll do it pretty quickly. And we may have a tropical storm by this time tomorrow morning when I'm doing my video. We'll be pretty close. Certainly by Sunday, we'll have a tropical storm, and several models show some pretty quick intensification up to hurricane intensity, maybe as quickly as Sunday afternoon or Sunday night, but certainly by Monday. And several models show this becoming a major hurricane by the beginning of next week, Monday and Tuesday. Not a threat to the islands at this point, and probably going a little bit more to the northeast of where Lee did. But it will be probably a major hurricane somewhere in the vicinity of Bermuda by the time we get into next Wednesday night and Thursday. The ensembles and the tropical models, generally speaking, take things a little to the east of Bermuda versus yesterday, which is encouraging, but nonetheless, it's still 5 to 6 days away and things can change. Here's a look at the ensembles from the European. Bermuda is right here, so there are still quite a few solutions that bring this near or to the west of Bermuda and then may try to threaten Nova Scotia. But the vast majority of the models do take the storm and recurve it near Bermuda to the right and pull it away from Atlantic Canada and just keep it a fish storm. And that's what I'm rooting for at this point. It's going to be a strong storm. I mean, we see pressures here on some of these ensembles as low as 939 or 946, which would be a Category 4 hurricane, kind of like Franklin. But unlike Franklin, unlike Idalia, and unlike Lee, more than likely this is going to end up to the right of Bermuda, not to the left of it. But still keep a very close eye if you are in Bermuda, because I do think this is close enough at this point where it could still be a threat. So that's what I'm going to be watching. This would be Nigel by the time we get to Saturday night and Sunday. The European control, Shows you the track of these storms. And we're going to have 3 on the map here by Sunday night. This is going to be extra tropical storm Lee. This is going to be weakening tropical storm Margot. And this will be strengthening tropical storm Nigel. And Nigel will likely be a hurricane by the time we get to Monday afternoon or Monday night. You can see it's going to come pretty close to Bermuda here. We'll see the western impact of it, at least if this model is correct. And then it'll recurve away, and not expecting to hit Atlantic Canada at this point. Now, we do see another system which will probably develop next weekend into Tropical Storm Ophelia. And we also need to watch pressures lowering here with a front stuck off the southeast coast. We may have some what I call homebrew activity here near Florida or near the southeast by next weekend. So if you are planning a beach trip next weekend in the southeast, just a heads up, we may have rough weather, whether or not we get a named system out of that. But we do need to keep an eye on that. We are going to have to watch what'll be Ophelia, I believe. Right now, the general feeling is that the storm will try to turn northward before it gets to Bermuda, but that could certainly still change. Here's a look at the GFS model. This is the 0Z run. The new one should be coming in. I could show that to you in a little bit. And you can see the storm also stays to the right of Bermuda, right around 60 west, which would be better news for Bermuda, obviously. Will put us on the better side. And it looks like it's going to turn away from Newfoundland around a subtropical high pressure system next weekend. We do see our next system here coming in a little bit lower. This one is aimed at the Northeast Caribbean islands. It'll probably be a hurricane, Ophelia, by the time we get to next Tuesday or Wednesday. And that's going to come pretty close to the islands here, so keep an eye on it. Interestingly, the GFS tries to develop something in the Western Caribbean, bringing you up into Florida as well. That would be Philippe. But, man, I don't trust the GFS model around Central America this time of the year. I do trust it a little bit more over the Central Atlantic, so I would not get too caught up into one model run. If you look at the next model, by the way, and I don't even think it goes out that far, it shows lowering pressures over the Bahamas and Eastern Florida, but it does not show anything over Central America. So we may have something out there. We may have a tropical storm east of Florida next weekend, but it's still kind of a difficult forecast to even make at this point. I'm not even going to try to hype anything up until I see something forming. I just don't see that being a threat. But the new GFS also takes us to the right of Bermuda, and that would be good news at this point. Then after that, things are a little bit quieter finally here off of the coast. By the way, it's not developing Philippe, that next wave, like it was with the previous run. If you see the previous run, it's got Philippe here. And if you look at yesterday afternoon's run, it's got Philippe as well. And if you look at the 12Z, that one was actually a little bit more menacing as it brought, no, maybe it wasn't the 12Z, maybe it was the 18Z. Hard to keep up with these. No, I guess not. It was a 6Z. The 6Z. Yeah, the 6Z it actually had coming down over Barbados into the Central Caribbean and hitting the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico as a hurricane, but it's backed off on that and trending east of the islands. So we're going to have to watch that one in the islands, but it's a ways off. Here's a look at the European control real quick with what'll be Nigel, and you can see it comes pretty darn close to Bermuda here, not right over the island like yesterday's runs, but making a close approach here late Wednesday night and Thursday of next week before pulling away. And then here's the control with Philippe, and you can see it is also aimed in that direction, but a little bit farther to the right, which is good news, of course, for Bermuda. The GFS model, you can see here, it will develop Nigel into a tropical storm over the weekend and then into a hurricane on Monday. You could see a pretty strong hurricane, but passing right around 61 west. Bermuda's at 65, so it's got 4 degrees of longitude between Bermuda and the core of the storm, and we certainly want to root on that solution. The run before it was a little bit more to the right, but still kind of in that general area. And then you can see the GFS starts developing Philippe here into maybe a hurricane the week after next and coming close to the islands. This looks a little bit more like Lee, actually, and then turning it away. And it's trying to develop something to take it over Bermuda. I don't know what it is with Bermuda in September, but it's such a small target, gets so many storms thrown at it in the models. And it's just something we're going to have to keep an eye on at this point. Not really going to lose sleep over something until it forms and we know exactly where it's going to go. Here's the HAFS tropical model, and you can see by Saturday afternoon we have tropical storm Nigel. By Sunday afternoon we have Hurricane Nigel, and this storm gets pretty deep on these tropical models. This would be a Category 3 hurricane by Tuesday morning, and maybe even making a run at Category 4 by Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Here's Bermuda, and here's the storm already beginning to make that right turn. So I do think that this trend in today's models is more encouraging if you're on Bermuda, but I don't want to give you the all clear by any stretch. This is still going to be in our hair, it looks like, by next Wednesday and Thursday. So if you're in Bermuda, once again, and I know you're prepared for hurricane season, but once again, keep a close eye on this. All right, well, we've got a front that's going to move through the central U.S. the next couple of days. Some severe weather possible around the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, maybe later tomorrow, and then eastern North Carolina over the weekend. So nothing organized, but something we're gonna have to keep watching. And then next week we could have some more intense storms. So I'm going to get back to watching those a little bit more, although the tropics keep me pretty busy for now. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please consider subscribing if you're new. I also have a membership channel if you feel led to. $9.99 a month helps support me, and I'm going to be growing that when I get a little bit more time as well, giving you all some special perks. And I just thank you for your attention and your time today. It means a lot to me. You all are the lifeblood of my channel. But what I will say is my lifeblood comes from God. I'm a Christian man and I give God all the glory. He gives me the strength every day to do what I do best, and that is fulfill his promises by being a blessing to other people, by doing my best to be the best forecaster that I personally can be. And when I get discouraged, I very quickly go to God and just tell him, hey, God, I really want to reach more people. I want to help more people out. What can I do? I don't try to do it on my own understanding. I try to lean on God's understanding. And I truly believe that we can all atone for our sins and all repent, turn to God, and accept Jesus Christ as our Savior if we so desire to. It is our choice, but it's a gift that's there for us. Acts of the Apostles 2:21 says, "And it shall come to pass that whoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved." John 3:16 says that God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son, sacrificed him on the cross. He was resurrected so that we could live eternally with him. What we do on earth matters very much, but it gets to a point in our life where we have to make a decision and say, I don't know what's happening next, but I can choose one of two paths. I can choose to think that I know where I'm going. Maybe there's a God, maybe there's not, but that's a very uncertain path. The other choice would be to go out in faith, and that is faith in the unseen, and to truly believe that because Jesus did rise from the dead, that he was a sacrificial lamb for us to live eternally, that we can accept that gift, we can repent, and we can be forgiven and redeemed, and one day be back with him in heaven. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't like gambling with my life and my afterlife. I didn't want to just be fearful of the future because we're not going to be here forever. I wanted to at least go out on faith saying that I have a chance to be eternally with Jesus. So going out on faith is why I started this YouTube channel. I continue to believe that I'm going to be blessed, but more importantly, I'm going to be able to bless other folks. And having said that, I would love to pray for you or with you or over you for whatever situation you may be going through. And if you could pray for me too, if you are a believer, then I very much would appreciate that as well. Hope you all have a wonderful Friday. We'll chat again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. See ya.